Um, I'm running a little bit behind. I should have done this show, the reflection of the Sunderland game on Sunday, but sometimes real life takes over, and I did something far more important and spent the day with my daughter. It was her 24th birthday on Sunday, so belated happy birthday to her, and it was lovely to spend time with her and forget about football just for a minute, even though the new season has only just started. So let's reflect. So I'm running a bit late in terms of what shows I wanted to put out. This should have gone out on Sunday, so then I could have given you a show about Karen Brady and her Talksport interview. But I'm going to do that later, so that will come out, and then there'll be a West Ham Weekly on Monday night as well. So it's going to be quite busy. So the warning signs were there for all to see, but some of us thought, well, how bad could it be? That rhymed, didn't it? After all, it was just newly promoted Sunderland at home in front of a fan base who had been starved of Premier League football for 8 long years. Not only that, they went out and bought a whole load of players. How dare they? 10, 11, 12 players. And it was going to take time for them all to gel in, or get to know each other. So, what better time than to play Sunderland than right now? Well, after the chastening 3-0 defeat at the end of the game on Saturday, it might be Sunderland fans who continue to enjoy Premier League football next season, whilst West Ham United fans could face the real prospect of looking at Championship football. Would that be such a bad thing in terms of watching real football again? It would certainly be bad for the board going down into the Championship, because I guarantee you, if we do get relegated this season, we're not coming straight back up. That's for sure. Now, we're lauding the fact 10 years in the new stadium. The new stadium, it's no longer new, is it? We're lauding the fact 10 years in the London Stadium that this is our longest unbroken period in our history of being a Premier League team. But how long is that going to last for? But if we do not fix the blatantly obvious issues with the squad, and if we do not fix them fast, we could be cut adrift from the rest of the Premier League even before the transfer window shuts in 2 weeks' time. Sunderland were always going to be bang up for this, and it proved to be so. Right, before I carry on, if you're new to this channel or if you've watched the West Ham Voice before and you would like to become a subscriber, please do subscribe to the channel. It costs nothing to subscribe, but if you want to become a member of the channel as well, then if you just follow the link below, you can become a member too. So, between now and the 1st of September, when the actual transfer window does shut, we will play Chelsea this coming Friday. We then play Wolves in the Carabao Cup on the 26th of August. And then we have Nottingham Forest on the 31st of August. And then the next game after that window, after the window shuts, is just a little match against Spurs on the 13th of September. But by that time, we may, as I've said, have 0 points in the league, and we could already be knocked out of one of the domestic cups. You know me, I'm usually always trying to look at the positives rather than the negatives. I'd like to think of myself as being quite level-headed and measured as to what my opinions are over West Ham. But after 8 months of being in charge, which includes what was by far a pretty decent pre-season, we seem to find ourselves under Graham Potter no further forward than we were after that really promising FA Cup game away to Aston Villa back in January. Look, let's briefly deal with what's happened between, from then to the end of the season and where we are now. 9 players left, as we all know, and we replaced 4. So Hermansen came in for Fabianski, Diouf came in for Creswell, Carl Walker-Peters came in for Soufal, and Wilson came in for Antonio. The other 5 players who left, one could argue that Kurt Zouma, wasn't with us last season anyway, so he was gone before last season. But in essence, we did replace him in a way because Naifa Gerd has returned from his loan spell in Spain. But the likes of Danny Ings hasn't been replaced. Neither have the 2 loan players, Ferguson and Soler. and neither has the one player that we've sold, Mohamed Kudus. Now, you could argue that we've gained Callum Marshall to replace Ings. Fair play. You could also argue that we've gained Freddie Potts to replace Soler. Okay. And you could stretch to suggest that once Crescencio Somerville returns from injury, there's your ready-made replacement for Mohamed Kudus. Okay. But we all know that we're fooling ourselves to think that this is going to be enough. And the glaringly obvious was there for all to see against the game against Sunderland this last weekend. Our defence remains porous and our midfield remains non-existent. Now, let's deal with the starting lineup, shall we? Now, I got two wrong. I wasn't sure whether Potter was going to play Areola or Hermansen, but he went for the new signing, Hermansen, so I got that wrong. Excuse me. And then the other player that I got wrong was Rodriguez started in place of Freddie Potts. And that was a shock, to be quite honest with you. All the other players, I kind of predicted. I kind of knew that Wan-Bissaka and Diouf would give us the width for as wing backs. I kind of knew that Tadibo, Kilman, and Agurd would start in central defence. I knew that Ward-Prowse and Paquetá would be nailed on, and I knew that Bone would be supporting Fulkrug up front. But the biggest shock, I mean, as much as it a bit of a surprise that Areola didn't start, for me, the biggest shock was why was Freddie Potts left out? He had a standout preseason. He played more games than most in central midfield. And not only did he have he was probably one of our best central midfielders throughout the whole of preseason. So why on earth was he dropped for Guido Rodriguez? It remains a mystery to me and many fans who saw that lineup. Now, not only did he not start, he also didn't get any game time at all throughout the game. Even when we were, sort of looking at making changes, again, he was not used. Now, why? What was it that Graham Potter decided for him to deem that central midfield partnership of James Ward-Prowse and Rodriguez was going to be better than having Freddie Potts on the pitch? How much worse could it have been if Freddie Potts had played? Now, not only that, but we also know what's going on with Edson Alvarez. We know that he's likely to be sold. Then why even bother having him on the sub bench if you think you're going to sell him? What was the point of that? There's a lot of talk about Rodriguez going as well. Now, the whole thing about Rodriguez going to Saudi Arabia is apparently a bit of a guess more than anything else. What people are doing is they're putting two and two together and coming up with five. They're saying, oh, he's on at 70, 80 grand a week. Who can afford that? No one in Spain can. No one over in South America can. Oh, we know. Saudis can. They'll buy anybody. Maybe that's true. Maybe someone from the Saudi league will buy Rodriguez. But at the moment, it doesn't look like he's going anywhere. Look, when it comes to Alvarez, look, if he's in the team, if he's in the squad, should I say, then play him, until we actually sell him. That's what other clubs do, like Fernandez in Southampton. They know they've got teams lining up to sign him, but they're going, well, we'll use him until he's gone. Do the same with Alvarez. Look, it couldn't have been any worse if we'd had a midfield two, a sort of a pivot two of Alvarez and Potts. It would have been an awful lot better, with the greatest of respect, than it was with Ward-Prowse and Rodriguez there. Look, had we had Alvarez and Potts in the middle of the park, then Paquetá would have been just ahead of them and he would have had the freedom to play his game. I mean, he was poor anyway, but he would have had more freedom to play his game. Anyway, it was odd. It was odd to have that midfield. And the irony is I stood there right from the kickoff and I had that sense of nervousness about me. I was really apprehensive. And to be honest with you, getting to half time and actually being in control of the game kind of surprised me. Now, I made a couple of errors. I was critical of why Guilherme and Marshall weren't at least on the bench, but we then found out that Guilherme has now got a broken collarbone and Marshall was suspended because of a red card offence whilst he was at Huddersfield the last game of the season there. Now, a broken collarbone could take anything between 6 to 12 weeks to heal, to recover from. So now, not only are we lacking, well, we've got no pace apart from what we have out wide. Not only are we lacking our midfield, we now are lacking even backup like Guilherme. So therefore, are we going to have to sort that out as well? I would like to think we will. Look, if I want to look at this game in any positive way, I've got to say the first half was pretty measured. We got a hold of the game. We weren't that inspiring, but we had a couple of chances. Their goalkeeper Rofes pulled off a couple of decent saves. But as we've seen under Graham Potter before, a decent measured first half performance was there to only be ripped apart in the second half. We had our chances, as I said, as did Sunderland, but we had the better chances in the first half. But the second half was clearly a game of tactics that Graham Potter failed on. Their coach, De Vries, found what our weaknesses were going to be or what our weaknesses were, and he decided to exploit them in the second half. Look, and there was another issue, of course. Sunderland had options on the bench. This newly promoted team have spent £150 million on players, and they had options on the bench to change the game. Now, when you hear the senior source suggesting that we can't buy players because we can't find anyone that's better than what we have, everyone knows that this is an insult to our intelligence, to every single West Ham fan out there. And when the board insists that the transfer market is a tough environment, every West Ham fan will look at other teams in the Premier League and ask why even clubs like newly promoted Sunderland can sign up to a dozen players in this summer, and we can only get 2 decent signings and 2 free agents. And when the senior source suggests that you can't go out and buy players for either Potter or Macaulay, if they don't want a player, you can't go out and buy them. Well, then why not buy the players they want rather than just buying them any players? The same rhetoric was used pre-Steiden, and again, it's being peddled out by the club, for not doing appropriate and quick business in the transfer market. It's tough. We can't find the right players. We can't find better than what we have. It's a load of crap. And we know it's a load of crap. It's tiring. It's annoying. It's deceitful. And it's misleading. There's no way on this earth that anyone is going to tell me that Carl Macaulay hasn't already presented a list of well-researched players that all West Ham United have to do is try and go and get a deal on. There's no way that he hasn't done that. So when the senior source says we can't find players any better than what we have, it's ridiculous. It's stupid. He's treating us like fools. Now, we've already seen Carl Macaulay's blueprint for player purchases. Give him an appropriate budget restriction or value, and he will identify players that will fit those financial restrictions. Sure, we got you for 19 million. We got Hermansen for 17 million. Great. And sure, out of the money that we sold Kudus for, we also had to pay Tadebo's loan to make it a permanent contract. We know it. We know that. But let's not also forget, it's not that there's no money and there isn't any money in the kitty. Let's not forget, should I say, that we've saved ourselves near on £30 million in salaries this season, for all the players that have since left. We no longer have players on high wages. Well, we still have, but, the likes of Ings, 120 odd grand a week. Zuma was on 100 grand a week. Fabianski was on something like 70 grand a week. We've saved all that money. Sure, we've got to pay for player wages for players that have come in, but I guarantee you, players like Hermansen, Carl Walker-Peters, etc., are not going to be on 100 grand a week. They're going to be on modest 50 grand a week, something like that. So, yeah, we've got to pay out for 4 players that we brought in, but there are 7 players that have left who were on contract and 2 players who were on loan. So we have saved money. There is money there. And yet the board keep hiding behind PSR and FFP. And yet the board have this summer gone out and gotten themselves 2 huge loans from Barclays Bank and Rights and Media Funding Limited. The Barclays Bank loan is 145 million. RMF one is undisclosed, but it's thought to be something like 40, 45, 50 million, something like that. Now, I would love to think that the reason why they've gone out and got those loans is for player purchases, but it doesn't look likely. And whilst again, it seems that we have to be reliant on selling more players in order to get more players in. Anyway, I've digressed, haven't I? Because this is all about the review of the Sunderland game. The bottom line is other clubs can find it easy to buy players, even newly promoted clubs. Yet West Ham United seem always to find the whole issue of buying and selling footballers really, really difficult. Well, if you're finding it difficult, Mr. Sullivan, you should have kept the director of football. If you weren't happy with Steiden, go out and get yourself another one that knows what to do. Anyway, back to the game. First half, it seemed that there's nothing to worry about. We were in control. We had possession. We kept the ball away from Sunderland, but there's only so many passes you can pass from central defender to central defender through to James Ward-Prowse, only back to a central defender again. Possession's great when you're going forward. Possession means nothing when you're not getting the ball past the halfway line. But anyway, we were comfortable. It seemed that we were fine. But then, as I said, Debris found our weaknesses and they started to exploit them. They started to move the ball faster and we couldn't keep up with the pace. They started to get more crosses into the box and we couldn't, even with 3 central defenders on the pitch, we couldn't even compete to head the ball away. Now, I thought it was Kilman who was at fault for the first goal, but it was actually Agurd who didn't get to the ball on the wrong side of the attacking player. Then their second goal was Paquetá trying to head the ball away in our 18-yard box. Why on earth was he marking one of their best central defenders who heads the ball, Daniel Ballard, when we got 3 central defenders on the pitch? Why was it left to Paquetá to defend that? 2-0 down, and then we completely fell apart. Our answer, Souček, Wilson, Irving, on for Todibo, Rodriguez and Ward-Prowse. Our strength in depth, or the lack of it, was there for all to see. Sunderland deserved their win, and I hope they go on to stay in the Premier League, but I hope it's not at our expense. Now, there are more problems in this squad than just midfield. I've already mentioned them. Whilst it's absolutely essential that we fix our midfield issues through the lack of strength, the lack of pace that we need, something that we've known about for quite some time since Declan Rice has left, we're still also lacking a dominant central defender. If we're going to have 3 central defenders on the pitch, then one of them has got to be a brute, a Craig Dawson type of defender. And with the greatest of respect, I like Todibo. I think he's a bit of a classy player, especially if he plays in the Italian league or the Spanish league. But I'm beginning to wonder whether he's actually cut out for the Premier League. I like Agurd, but the same applies to him. And there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that we've way overspent on Max Kilman, 40 million. And on top of that, the other problems that lie there, we didn't use our players to their strengths. How many of us were waxing lyrical about Malik Diouf, who's going to be flying down that wing, getting those crosses in, and getting the ball on the head of Fulkrug to score half dozen goals with his head? It's weird because we didn't utilize him. As the game was wearing on, everything was going down the right-hand side. I don't mind that, but switch it every now and again. Try and use the other side. Diouf was just standing there for most of the game, waiting for the ball to come to him. But then when it was coming to him, it wasn't sort of a direct pass that he could run onto and swing it into the box. It was one of those sort of a lackluster pass that he couldn't do much with. And all he could do was just pass it back into central midfield. So we weren't feeding him the type of balls that he could actually get onto and cross them, even when he's halfway into the attacking half of the pitch. And he couldn't get to the byline to get it across either, because we just weren't using him to his strengths. What's the point of buying a really, really good left wing back with a fantastic cross that we've seen? We saw it in pre-season, only to turn around and go, I don't do any of that. When you're playing in the Premier League, you don't want any of that. Fulkrug hardly got a sniff. Bowen was really ineffective, and I know a lot of people say don't play him as a striker, etc. He was just playing just off the striker, but he was ineffective. And ironically, when we actually did finally change the formation, we kind of went to some kind of 4-4-2. He went wider and he started to become more effective. As for central midfield, I can't blame Rodriguez for the game he had. It wasn't great, but it wasn't the worst. It wasn't the worst on the pitch. Ward-Prowse, Rodriguez, they're just not cut out for Premier League football anymore, or certainly not cut out to be starters in a Premier League team. Absolutely have them on the bench, use them as an alternative as the game goes on, but certainly not starters. And Paquetá, with the greatest of respect to him, he flattered to deceive as well. Nothing really came off for him. And whilst I would worry about selling Paquetá if we got a decent offer for him, I would then like to think that if we got a decent offer, then if we were spending that money on replacements, then I'd say go for it, to be quite honest with you. If we thought, sorry, should be a Q rather than the W. That's trust me for typing that his name pretty quickly. If I thought genuinely that we were going to spend Paquetá money to buy ourselves 3 central midfielder, because if we sell Alvarez and if we sell Paquetá, we already need one central midfielder without selling anyone at the moment. We need something different. If we sell Alvarez, we need 2. If we also sell Paquetá, we need 3. Now, Romano has been pushing it, hasn't he? Suggesting that Paquetá is ready to make a move. But Lucas Paquetá made the right noises after the game because he put out a photo on, I don't know, his Instagram or whatever of the team. And he said, in it together, whatever it is it said, we're in it together. And he believes that we're going to have a better season. We're going to have a great season. Let's hope he's right. But he needs to play a part in that. So that doesn't suggest to me that he's actually leaving. Anyway, but whether it's him or Alvarez or anyone else that we sell, we need to sort out our midfield. We were slow. We had no creativity. And if we suffer like this against the newly promoted side, what on earth is going to happen to us against Chelsea at home on Friday night? There is simply no positives to take from this game in the first game of the season. The formation was wrong. The team selection was wrong. The tactics were wrong. That's on Potter. That's on him. But the fact that we had nothing on the bench to make it any different, that's on the board, without a shadow of a doubt. So what do I expect from Friday? I expect Graham Potter to give us an answer on the pitch. I would love to think that we would sign at least 2 players in time to go straight into this team on Friday night. But I'm not expecting that to happen. So that means Potter is going to have to find answers with the current squad that he has. So should he drop the 5-3-2? Yes, I think so. That formation didn't work. But I don't think he will drop it, especially against Chelsea. He's going to be a little bit worried and he's going to want to defend, isn't he? So far, that formation doesn't work. But what are we going to do instead? Well, if he's going to keep the formation, he's then got to change the personnel. Now, laugh if you want, but I would drop 2 of the 3 centre-backs that started on Saturday, and I would introduce Dinos. At least, at the very, all right, he's got an error in him, but he's probably the better header of the ball out of the 4 centre-backs that we currently have. And I will also put Aaron Wan-Bissaka in the back 3 as well. Dinos, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and another, probably a Gerd or Kilman on the left. I would drop Todibo, and I think Kilman, maybe keep a Gerd. Do I keep Hermansen in goal? Well, yeah, and much for the same reason as I suggested last season when Areola had a bit of a mare. I think it was against Arsenal, it might have been. And then he was dropped. And I was saying, look, he had a mare. Keep him in the team. Let him get his mojo back. Support him. Show your support for him. And I think the same now with Hermansen. He didn't have a great game. He didn't have a great debut. But I would keep him in that lineup and say, go out and prove to us that you are worthy of the money that we've paid for you and that you will become our future number 1. Now, keep the youth, but use him more and bring in Carl Walker-Peters. So this is the sort of team that I think that we should have on if he's staying with a back five. So keep Hermansen, put Wan-Bissaka alongside Dinos and Agurd, Carl Walker-Peters and Diouf to be used as wing backs, and then bring in Freddie Potts and Alvarez. If Alvarez is still here and hasn't been sold, use him, just like other teams use their players until their players are sold. And then provide a little bit more width either side of Fulkrug, give him more support with Bowen and Paquetá either side. That's if he keeps a back five. I would prefer he change the formation and go with maybe a back four. And in a back four, Hermansen again in goal. I would have Wan-Bissaka and Diouf either side with Dinos and Agurd again as the two pairing at the back. And then again, Alvarez and Potts to give us that pivot in the middle. And then bring in Souček, who can fall in just behind the front Fulkrug, and Bowen and Paquetá on the flanks. We're not looking at out-and-out Paquetá winger. We know he's not a winger, but we know he's played in that kind of position before, and he can do it again. But I don't think Potter is going to change the formation. So let's see what he does. Let's see what he does with the team. Whether he changes the personnel to keep the back five. Is he going to keep Ward-Prowse in? Quite possibly. Is he going to call Rodriguez back in again? I'd hope not. No disrespect to Rodriguez. The formation and the selection is going to be really, really important. Now, there are other things that have happened. Of course, there's all this stuff about there was a fracas and the police were called into the away changing room, etc. I've called it out as a load of rubbish. I think many others have as well. So I don't think there's anything to report there. Now, I am going to listen to the Brady interview. So I will come back and do a show about that as well. So do look out for that too. I'm sorry it's been a bit depressing, first game of the season, but I really cannot see anything that is worthy of supporting. We've got the tactics wrong. We've got the formation wrong. We've got the lineup wrong. That's all on Potter. We haven't got the resources to bring alternative players in to give us something different. That's on the board. Let's hope by the end of this week, we've sorted out both things. Thank you for watching and listening. Like I said, if you want to become a subscriber and a member of the channel, please click on the link that's scrolling across the bottom of the screen. I'll see you all again soon. Thank you for watching and listening. Have a good Monday.